All right. Good afternoon. I know it's the afternoon when you were going to do a live show tonight on Monday, but we wanted to get this out. We've got a lot of content that's coming out this weekend that already is out about the fires. One more and I'm out of here, guys. Did a quick take because they're firefighters, so that was a good take. John's take on LA was amazing, so go back and listen to all of those. But John, I wanted to jump on here today real quick, talk about a TikTok ban that's coming up in less than about 6 days.
They could rule on it as early as today, is what I'm
as
hearing.
early as today. Yeah, will TikTok go away? So it's up in front of the Supreme Court. Not looking good so far, but it's complicated and it's complex. And so I don't think a lot of people understand. I think a lot of people, John, are just kind of putting off the side. I think it's almost like there's no possible way, and they're thinking there's no way they're going to ban TikTok. I mean, that's the consensus I'm getting from the lay folk is I'm not really worried about it because there's just no way. I'm not so sure.
I think that they should wake up to the fact that last April, the ban passed both houses of Congress with bipartisan support. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. Joe Biden signed it into law. This actually happened. Trump, although back in 2020, he said he was going to ban TikTok as punishment for the COVID mishandling or the fact that the virus existed at all. He's gone back and forth. He said he was going to get rid of it. He also said he was going to save it. I don't think that there's any coincidence at all that the deadline is supposed to be January 19th when the change of administration is supposed to happen. Of course, it's not the end of the road either way with what happens. If the ban follows through, it could be brought back before the Supreme Court in a different way, or it could also be there could be new legislation put forward to bring it back. That's the thing about the Congress, is that we could decide that was the wrong move and we could decide to lift the ban. But what's the most interesting thing for me is that this hasn't happened in a long time. I don't really know how I feel about it. We have competing good interests here, and you have three entities that are really at odds. And what it comes down to me is, who do you trust? Do you trust the U.S. government? Not really. Since when does the government know what's best for us? Do you trust the Chinese government? Well, of course not. They're the kind of people who tend to run down students with tanks in Tiananmen Square and then, erase it from history. They're the kind of people that, want to take over Taiwan and all this and really the rest of the world and destroy the West. They definitely don't have our interests at heart. And then finally, do you trust the American people? Well, that's always kind of been what the First Amendment has been about, is that we said that we trust people to talk and to hear different ideas, possibly dangerous ideas, possibly treasonous or seditious ideas, or even ideas that undermine who we are as a culture. And do you trust people? Well, I used to say that I would trust people, but anymore, I don't know if it's because I'm older, because of how younger people are now, but I'm not sure that I trust people to do the right thing in terms of where they're vesting their creativity in their businesses. But I'll tell you, if they do pass this ban, it's going to be bad for American businesses. There's a lot of small businesses that are going to be harmed because they only exist on TikTok. They have no advertising budget. The only way that they can get out that they exist is on there. I know that a lot of creativity and entrepreneurship goes through TikTok. I know that like Lil Nas X's song, Old Town Road, that premiered on TikTok and became a #1 song. But the other thing is like, is it really that we're arguing against free speech, or are we just saying, well, this is really a corporate ownership problem, that China's having a controlling interest in what's going on with a tool that could be used to surveil data on us is a problem, and so we need to make sure that the company or the platform that we're using is just vested with American interests. So they're trying to phrase it as a free speech problem. And of course, if you're going to do that, I'm always going to choose free speech, even the dangerous speech. But if you're framing it as a problem of ownership and whether or not a foreign power that doesn't like America will have an advantage on us, whether it's gathering information or influence our culture, it's the competing good ideas. Eric, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm mixed on this as well, because it's a bipartisan thing, right? So now we have both sides of the government, left and the right, all in agreement that TikTok is bad, which is surprising. Except they're on a couple. They're on two different pages on why they disagree. So the Biden administration, in early April, they had come out that said that this was that the First Amendment did not apply with the ban at all. Well, the circuit courts were like, well, no, actually, there is a lot about the First Amendment in this that applies and that we have to look at. In the for the Supreme Court. So that argument didn't go anywhere, and of course, Trump's argument there is kind of almost like a fair market thing. Okay, well, China's not allowed. Well, like China's giving us, all with the COVID thing, but in the misinformation, disinformation coming from China, but also China does not allow Facebook. China doesn't allow Google. China doesn't allow, and also China uses TikTok for totally different reasons than Americans use TikTok. So the Chinese ran company, that's another thing. It's not a completely Chinese owned company, but it is very influenced by China because the majority of the owners are from China. So, there's that too. So I don't know that you could go on the grounds of, well, First Amendment does not apply to a Chinese company. Well, there are plenty of other ownership that doesn't make it just a foreign owned entity. However, it is extremely highly influenced, solely influenced by China. So you have a couple of different things here when it comes to talking about the First Amendment, John. And one, does the First Amendment apply to a foreign entity? And two, the other question the Supreme Court would have to answer, and they've already come up with the answer, and the answer is yes, is this technically a foreign-owned company? They deemed, yes, it is. It is a foreign-owned company, definitely a foreign-influence company. And so does that mean all foreign companies are subject to First Amendment rights? Like, does Germany have First Amendment rights in America? Does a German-owned business have First Amendment rights while doing business in America?
It's a broader question than even than that. We've always had questions about whether or not we should have foreign-made goods in this country. I know back in the 80s, the big three automakers wanted us to put additional tariffs on foreign cars and things like this. And if you're a conservative, your answer is that the free market's always going to do what's best for the consumer. So for me, it really doesn't come down to what free speech is in terms of China. They're going to be expressing things here, and I don't think that it's up to us to censor it. We have to ask ourselves, if censoring them, does that make us better than China? They censor a lot of stuff from their own people. They, like I said, you can't really meet a Chinese person who will speak openly about the Tiananmen Square thing. Okay, so they protect a lot of their own interests from their own people. Are we going to protect? Are we going to censor and keep our people from knowing what's going on in China or what's going on here in the United States? And it comes down to the slippery slope argument, right? You're like, well, I'm okay with them taking TikTok down because we don't want a foreign nation spying on us. Well, these other platforms, as David makes a comment, is that all these platforms are spying on us. Every time you download an app, it's monitoring something about your demographics, how to sell things to you, or what you're up to. So these things can be dangerous. So it seems like maybe we should get rid of a lot of things.
Well, and that's their fear, though. Their fear is that China will weaponize that data mining, as in and it almost sounds like, and I'm going to play a clip here and you can tell me if you disagree or agree, but it almost sounds like they're afraid that China is going to release, and they specifically mention vices. They know your vices. So if they know everything about you, what porn you're into, what TikTok, what videos you stop on versus don't stop on, and then also baiting you in to different content, they're afraid that then China could go and use not only that content, but they can use anything else that they gather from you and weaponize it. Whereas I think there's probably regulation in the United States that would prevent a company from taking that information that they've mined from you and then weaponizing it.
I would say go ahead and play the clip.
So this is coming from the U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prolager, and this is what her argument this week is.
TikTok poses a grave threat to national security. No one disputes that the PRC seeks to undermine U.S. interests by amassing vast quantities of sensitive data about Americans and by engaging in covert influence operations. And no one disputes that the PRC pursues those goals by compelling companies like ByteDance to secretly turn over data and carry out PRC directives. Those realities mean that the Chinese government could weaponize TikTok at any time to harm the United States. TikTok collects unprecedented amounts of personal data. And as Justice Sotomayor noted, it's not just about the 170 million American users, but also about their non-user contacts who might not even be engaging with the platform. That data would be incredibly valuable to the PRC. For years, the Chinese government has sought to build detailed profiles about Americans, where we live and work, who our friends and coworkers are, what our interests are, and what our vices are. TikTok's immense data set would give the PRC a powerful tool for harassment, recruitment, and espionage. On top of that, the Chinese government's control over TikTok gives it a potent weapon for covert influence operations. And my friends are wrong to suggest that Congress was seeking to suppress specific types of content or specific types of viewpoints. Instead, the national security harm arises from the very fact of a foreign adversary's capacity to secretly manipulate the platform to advance its geopolitical goals in whatever form that kind of covert operation might take.
So that was the voice of the U.S. Solicitor General.
So that I ripped from Breaking Points. They've been following this very closely, but yeah, I mean, so like I said, this is multi-pronged because one, we have a tit for tat, which is kind of what Donald Trump's problem was. You're not going to allow American-based, or you're not going to allow Facebook, and you're not going to allow freedom of speech in your country, but then you're going to dictate what we have. And here's the problem with what they dictate. So in China, TikTok is all about engineering and arts and crafts and music and drawings and anything that has to do with education and learning. It's a great learning tool. I was actually just talking with somebody on the phone who has Chinese relatives living with them. And so this is how it was explained, that it's completely different content. Now, I started a TikTok channel, and I guess you would have to trust me on this one, or maybe you can try it yourself, or maybe you've experienced yourself. But, I started a TikTok channel. I have multiple TikTok channels, but I started one from a different phone, brand new phone, this phone actually. And I started it for a homeschooling, unschooling, and then also my children's content. Now on my phone, I search all sorts of weird stuff. I mean, police shootings, salacious celebrity news, anything to keep me in the know. So there's a lot of stuff on this phone, but on this phone, it's virtually wiped. There's nothing on it. It's new. I haven't searched anything yet. I put in my interests for TikTok, which are homeschooling and survival and things like that. Still, every other image that comes across that phone is some kind of overtly sexual, somebody fake breastfeeding somebody or whatever. So, it's being used to poison the minds. And again, that is a tactic being used by China. I'd like to ask you this too, John. Do you think we would have allowed the Russians to do this in the 80s? Would they have been able to have a propaganda-based media outlet here in the United States that poisoned the mind? I mean, as far as I know, Russian cartoons were banned. What's the Shasha and the Bear or whatever it is?
Yeah,
that was banned from the United States for a long time because they were afraid that was some kind of propaganda to poison children's minds.
Well, you draw a very excellent comparison. And I was thinking about this, we've always had problems with the communists, the past 100 years, we've been doing battle with them. And the Solicitor General identifies China as an adversary. Okay. So if China is an adversary, why are they a key trading partner? If we're truly adversaries, then why do we exist like in a Cold War or not Cold War with them, where we feel like we're do tremendous financial trade and commerce with China, but they're our adversary? I think it's a problem. We weren't doing commerce and business with Cuba and with the Soviet Union. And in terms of whether or not they would have been allowed to operate in this country, I think we have to realize the fundamental difference between communist China and Soviet Russia. In the Truman days, Truman Doctrine was all about spreading or preventing the spread of communism across the world and stopping what they called the domino effect from these smaller countries falling one at a time to becoming under Soviet influence. China doesn't do that anymore. They don't do aggressive expansion of their geopolitical strength through force anymore. They do it through economics, and they do it through much more sinister ways, like influencing our culture. So, and the Russians wanted us to become like them. They wanted us to become a Soviet country. So when we had communists operating in this country and spreading communist and Marxist propaganda, it was to topple love of capitalism. The communist China is a very capitalist country. Look at how wealthy they are and how wealthy they've become. So they've sort of become completely a different brand of communism than Soviet Russia ever was. And their ultimate goal is not to make us like them. Their ultimate goal is to destroy us and to destroy our influence so that they can become the first world nation on earth. So in some ways, they're much more dangerous and insidious. And although we recognize Russia as a force to be opposed and as a real threat, certainly with their primary means of destroying us being nuclear weapons, we are completely oblivious to the threat that China poses. And now China can use our own ideals against us, right? We're trying to tell China that you can't surveil us through our applications on our phones, that you need to divest your interests. But China's saying, well, your own philosophy, your own laws, your own First Amendment says that we have a right to be here and we have the right to influence you. And they're taking advantage of an almost naive aspect of our culture, which is also one of our most cherished aspects. Like, I would not want to see a United States of America that doesn't love the open expression of ideas, but they're taking advantage of one of the core elements that defines our society. So when do you say enough is enough? Well, I think the answer is that you have to go through with the TikTok ban, because we will still have free speech in this country. And I'm hoping that since China likes to make deals and persuade people through financial power, that they'll see how much money that they're losing by not having TikTok properly operating in this country, and that they'll want to make a sale and we could bring TikTok back as a US backed company.
Yeah, I would be surprised to see what they come up with, because I mean, overwhelmingly right now, the votes are in that there will be a TikTok ban. Now you have Trump coming into office, who could change a lot of these things. But, it is in Trump's best interest to have TikTok because, he is a social media king. One of the things I brought up is where is the lack of PSAs? Why do we not have public service announcements that explain how to better use the app? Why are then other apps not promoting good content, but only content that is, if you go to your search blog right now, and a lot of people, if you go on your Instagram and you go on your search blog, it's like the more controversial or the more overtly sexual content is pushed to the beginning of the algorithm. If that's truly the argument that we're dumbing us down, or we're not putting out good quality content, and the content is misinformation, disinformation, then why aren't we working with these companies to promote good, healthy content? If I get on there and say, don't cheat on your wife and be a good parent, that post will go absolutely nowhere. But if I say, something controversial like, I spank my kids and I don't let them choose what they want to eat, all of a sudden I have to phrase that and be an enemy and elicit an argument to give the same speech. Does that make sense? I'm still, the same meaning is there. I just have to word it in a controversial way. And I don't think that should be, that difficult of a problem to solve. Also, we have this issue now with other apps coming out from this. I mean, China is on, and when there's you mentioned it earlier, Lemon 8 and some other apps that China is already developing through the same company to push those out almost immediately, which would make the Supreme Court and the circuit courts do all of this argument over again. And of course, then the show still goes on. I want to read this article really quick. And then we'll get out of here. Let's keep it a quick show. But this is coming from the Oklahomian, the Oklahomian.com. Will TikTok actually be banned? What happens to my app and what you need to know? It says on Friday, the Supreme Court heard arguments regarding banning the app from nearly 170 million domestic users. TikToks will be banned in the United States on January 19th, but there are two potential routes to get the app to remain operating in the nation. USA Today provided live updates from the courtroom. All right, let me tell you what the steps are. One, the Supreme Court does not act against the law this week. The law will go into effect on the 19th, banning the app from the United States. So, start preparing, because this is a huge possibility. Some of you guys that are making lots of money off of TikTok, you should probably start preparing to start working with some other apps. This means you won't be able to download the app. If you already have it installed, it will eventually just stop working. Your For You page will go silent, new content won't load, and the app will essentially become blank screen. Depending on the court's ruling and direction, ByteDance could simply let the app weather and die, or they could just pull the plug entirely. Another option is that they could sell it. The Chinese company could sell it. So unless one of two things happen, the app will be banned beginning January 19th. The first would be the Supreme Court decide with the app and allow it to stay open. That could happen. I doubt it. I doubt it unless some people are making some real under the table deals. Because remember, the first votes on this were pretty overwhelming. It was pretty likely that this app is going to go away. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of nays. This would rely on the majority vote from the 9-person court. The other would be if the app complies with law's request for an American owner. And just to touch on that, China has pretty much said, no, we're not going to do that. So they're playing the game here. I'm sure there's a lot of American companies that are going to lose out on money too, and they're trying to play that bluff. But at the end of the day, John, and I'll let you have closing argument here. At the end of the day, though, this is where I trust the courts. They know more than we do. They have more information. I believe the 9-man court in this scenario, there's not really a win-win in this scenario, but they have to make what is the best decision for the United States going forward. Also, what I'd like to see come out of this, though, is maybe some more legislation down the road on freeing up freedom of speech in other technology communication softwares. We're already seeing it with X, Instagram, and now we have Zuckerberg coming out and telling all of the truth. Fair weather friend or not, he's still making a lot of admittances that the FBI was using social media tools as an influence, as propaganda, and it was silencing our First Amendment right. So hopefully with all of this, what comes to light is more legislation that allows First Amendment speech across technologically based communication websites and apps.
I think it takes a lot to get Democrats and Republicans to agree on something. If you're getting broad, sweeping, bipartisan support, the Congress is probably hearing something from intelligence committees and other sources that is fairly compelling. It's not that I necessarily trust those sources. It's not necessarily that I trust anyone. It's not necessarily that I trust a piece of legislation that was signed off by Joe Biden. But we're being shown that China for sure is an adversary. They're referred to as by the U.S. government as an adversary. They don't have our best interests at heart. You mentioned pornography. I know that's something that undermines families. It's something that undermines productivity. It's something that undermines strong masculinity. And I know that that's exactly what China wants for us, is the worst possible thing for us. So if you want to know what's good for you and what's good for your country, it's got to be the opposite of what China wants, because China does not want what's best for us. But I do agree with you with what you said, that today it's popular to or at least in certain segments, to go after TikTok because of who they are and who they're owned by. But there's always a runaway effect where today they come for TikTok, but who are they coming for tomorrow? You could say, well, we're going to ban this book and we're going to ban that book and we're going to ban this book. But, how long is it before the disgusting or the bad books are banned? And then eventually someone says we ought to ban the Bible too. So you always have to constantly be vigilant, constantly be watchful if you're going to take a strong stance. And shutting down a platform, it's never been done in this country. But we've only lived in the era of apps and smartphones since 2005, since the Obama era. And so we're in groundbreaking era in terms of developments of the law and of news. And this is going to be a watershed moment where we decide how we're going to be handling these things in the future. And it's also going to send a strong statement to other countries who will have influence on us through these apps, whether or not we're going to tolerate it and whether or not we're going to fight back against it.
It's extremely important for you to pay attention to who your Supreme Court justices are, who your appellate judges are when you go to vote. These guys are making really, really big decisions, possibly bigger decisions than anyone else locally. So even your local Supreme Court, these are people that you should dive into. You should at least put a little bit of time and effort into it, because they're the ones at the end of the day, as we're seeing here, making such a massive, impactful decision about what's going to go on TikTok. It's going to affect a lot of people's lives, a lot of influencers, for good and for bad. It is going to have a massive effect in 2025. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Also, we have the strike, the rest on the strike coming to an end. So I'm sure that that is going to ramp up very soon. We're going to hear a lot more news about that. I think they're going to prolong, and the media is not going to start putting that out until closer to Trump taking over. So this can be more of a Trump problem than it ever was a Biden problem. We're kind of seeing that in California right now, where they're, trying to push it off on like, well, what's your president-elect doing? Where's your president-elect? Trying to gaslight you into taking the blame off of the absolutely, as John just did an episode on, the absolutely terrible and horrific leadership in Los Angeles and California. And as John puts it, getting exactly what they deserved and what they've asked for. Guys, if you like this type of content, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you for tuning in to FAWKES News. Share us with a friend, but most importantly, give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or Spotify. If every single person that listens to this show just took the time to give a 5-star rating and a review, put us back on the charts. Good. We try to be objective news here, and it would be very easy to cause controversy, and take a hard stance. But I think we're fair, and we're pretty, objective when it comes to looking at all sides, especially in something like this. So don't let mainstream media fool you. John, thank you for joining me tonight. A lot of you, G.I. Joe says it the best. Maybe you didn't know about the TikTok ban ticking down, but now you do know, and knowing is half the battle. Take us out of here, John.
All right, guys, be safe, be smart, make good decisions, trust nobody, carry the fire.
Make counter accusations.